Welcome to the webinar, Possible Applications of AI to Support FMEA Moderation. My name is Franziska Kramaike. I am part of the PeakAvenue marketing team. We are pleased to welcome you today at one of our webinars within the Quality and Engineering Circle. I would like to point out that we have recorded this presentation in advance to avoid technical problems due to high registration numbers. But our speaker, Sebastian Leopold, is present at this webinar and will be available for your questions at the end. You can ask your questions via the chat function. I will collect them and ask them to our speaker at the end in the Q&A session. You can find the chat function in your webinar dashboard. We will make this webinar recording available to you over the next week as well. I think now we are ready. Thiemo and Sebastian, you can start with your presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you have joined from, and welcome to our presentation. I'm Thiemo Zambanini, COO of PeakAvenue, and this is Sebastian Leopold, CTO of PeakAvenue. Pretty sure you have already come across artificial intelligence in your life, and probably even on a daily basis. No matter whether you use a modern navigation system, you booked some vacation, or you simply searched something on the internet, artificial intelligence is all around us. Consequently, one has to think about possibilities to use artificial intelligence to support in the creation of FMEA. We are happy to take you with us on our tour through options and chances, but also potential limitations when using artificial intelligence in FMEA.
Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio o buonasera, a seconda del luogo da cui siete arrivati e benvenuti alla nostra presentazione. Io sono Thiemo Zambanini, CEO di PeakAvenue, e lui è Sebastian Leopold, CTO di PeakAvenue. Sicuramente vi sarete già imbattuti nell'intelligenza artificiale nella vostra vita e probabilmente anche quotidianamente. Sia che usiate un moderno sistema di navigazione, sia che abbiate prenotato una vacanza, sia che abbiate semplicemente ricerca su internet, l'intelligenza artificiale è ovunque intorno a noi. Di conseguenza si deve pensare alle possibilità di utilizzare l'intelligenza artificiale per supportare nella creazione di FMEA. Saremo lieti di accompagnarvi nel nostro tour attraverso le opzioni e le possibilità, ma anche le potenziali limiti nell'uso dell'intelligenza artificiale nella FMEA.
God morgon, god eftermiddag eller god kväll beroende på varifrån ni kommer och välkomna till vår presentation. Jag är Thiemo Zambanini, VD för PeakAvenue och det här är Sebastian Leopold, CTO för PeakAvenue. Du har säkert redan stött på artificiell intelligens i ditt liv och förmodligen till och med på en daglig basis. Oavsett om du använder ett modernt navigationssystem, har bokat en semesterresa eller helt enkelt sökt något på internet, artificiell intelligens finns överallt omkring oss. Följaktligen måste man tänka på möjligheterna att använda artificiell intelligens för att stödja i skapandet av FMEA. Vi tar gärna med dig på vår resa genom alternativ och chanser, men också potentiella begränsningar vid användning av artificiell intelligens i FMEA. 早上好，下午好，或者晚上好，这取决于你们是从哪里加入的。欢迎参加我们的演讲。我是 PeakAvenue 首席执行官 Thiemo Zambanini， 这位是 PeakAvenue 首席技术官 Sebastian Leopold。相信大家在生活中已经接触过人工智能，甚至是每天。无论你是使用现代导航系统，还是预定假期，或者只是人工智能就在我们身边。因此，我们必须考虑使用人工智能来支持创建 FMEA 的可能性。我们很高兴能带您一起探索在 FMEA 中使用人工智能师的选项和机会，以及潜在的限制。
So, welcome to our presentation AI meets FMEA. Thanks to Mr. Zambanini for introducing me 4 times in a row. After this impressive demonstration of what can be achieved with artificial intelligence, I think you have noticed that Dr. Zambanini is only capable of speaking one of the 4 languages. I would now like to give a short and admittedly a very superficial introduction to what artificial intelligence actually is, in the sense of the current hype. And that is how we get to the first point of our agenda of the current presentation. Generative AI, how does it work, and a little bit where does it come from? The history of AI, there were neural networks in the 1950s to 1970s. The first real emerge of neural networks was in the 1950s and latest until about 1970. Frank Rosenblatt, a US-American psychologist and computer scientist, together with his colleague Charles Whiteman, developed the first successful neurocomputer. This was a computer based on logical neurons, similar to those in our brains. Already this first neurocomputers could be used for solving simple pattern recognition problems. After that first part of the history, the technology became more and more sophisticated in the course of time. However, it soon became clear that for the sophisticated problems, very powerful hardware is necessary. The following years, approximately until the year 2010, the focus therefore was on machine learning. And machine learning is about designing algorithms and models that allow learning based on data and making predictions and decisions without being explicitly programmed. One of the problems, however, has been enormous amount of data are needed and to train the models. Due to the success of the internet, we have this amount of data today, which brings us to the next point on the timeline. From the year 2010 on, the so-called deep learning was developed. This is a special technique of machine learning which brings neural networks, but now with many layers, hence the deep learning name, back into focus. The now available data volumes must also be processed. However, which was made possible by the development of powerful graphic processors, the so-called GPUs. Deep learning is therefore a technology on which the impressive AI applications are based, with which we have all had contact. And especially in the last year, for example, through ChatGPT, they have experienced a real hype. So let's take a closer look at machine learning and deep learning. In both cases, the aim is to make a statement about an input. And so let's take a look at a classification problem. Is it a car or not? For this decision, you need a classification model specialized on this task, and that is similar for both cases. But how is such a model created that can automatically perform the classification? Well, at the beginning, there are the input data. So the input data would be a data set with many pictures of cars, for example. These are now classified by legions of people which do the process of feature extraction. And they classify, is it a car on the picture or is it no car? And the result is a model that can perform the classification for new inputs at the end. Deep learning also starts with the input data. But in the second step, however, the feature extraction and model building are combined. In the end, AI is created that can also do things like classifying objects, like with the machine learning approach before. The many layers involved in the deep learning also make these models more suitable for complex data structures. And since deep learning eliminates the manual process of feature extraction, it is much more efficient, but not necessarily more accurate. Nevertheless, the most impressive success have been achieved with deep learning. In example, the introduction video at the beginning of this presentation. So, what is generative AI? In the recent years, deep learning has been combined with the so-called transformers. Here, an AI is trained to first learn the input data and then recreate it correctly. This combination has resulted in outstanding tools that are now ready to be integrated into many applications. And that combination is now called generative AI. For example, ChatGPT from OpenAI. After this short and superficial introduction into the technology, let's talk about what can be achieved with generative AI. Well, as the name says, there would be, for example, text generation and image generation, but also anomaly detection, as well as language translation, suggestion systems, and content summarization. Especially the three last points are new candidates for use in a quality and engineering system and in a particular area of the failure mode and defect analysis. But also anomaly detection can be a powerful tool, for example, in the digitalized manufacturing. Today, however, we will focus on the last three. What is a recommendation system? As the name suggests, it is a system that makes suggestions based on input and learning. This is what we call a Copilot today. And based on your input, we recommend to also adding this. You can see this schema here. The next point is content summarization. And we can use content summarization, for example, to explain a failure chain or a cause and effect chain. And so we could ask the trained deep learning model the question, can you summarize a failure chain based on the root causes? And we will get a snippet like effect is caused by effect 4, which is caused by effect 3 or effect 2. Effect 2 is caused by effect 1 or effect 5. But there are also pitfalls, and we have to be aware of that because generative AI is generating and not thinking. So the statement here is AI can have hallucinations, and these hallucinations are a really pitfall where we have to be aware of. So I will now hand over this presentation to my colleague, Thiemo Zambanini, and he will guide you through the benefits of generative AI in FMEA.
So after this introduction into AI, let us now take a look at how to use generative AI in creating FMEAs. For this, we should first think about the current situation. What is it like to create FMEAs? Or what does it feel like quite often? Well, if you listen to people doing FMEAs, and probably to at least some of you listening right now, the answer might be it's a laborious process, which is taking long hours, in which you have to do repetitive tasks, and quite often it is just done to satisfy the system. You need a cross-functional team from many different divisions that does manual assessments in team meetings. And you really do need everybody together to get all the information because it's spread over a wide range of people. And in the end, you end up to quite often probably copy and paste existing information from A to B. Even though you have already thought about the same thing over and over again, but hey, you need yet again to repeat it. So basically, FMEA might be annoying sometimes. And to be honest, I do have one more thing for you that might be annoying. Even with AI, you still have to do FMEAs. You will not get around it. But artificial intelligence can help. So we basically do have bad news and we have good news. The bad news is, and I'd assume this is especially for quite some team members in FMEA sessions, AI will not replace human resources to create FMEAs. You still have to do it. And the good news, and this is probably mainly for the moderators, AI will not replace human resources to create FMEAs. You still have a job. So let's see how AI actually can support FMEA. And here we are going to focus mainly on two groups of people. Number one, we have the administrators, and number two, we have the moderators. Let us start with the administrators. I don't know whether we have any system administrator in this presentation today, but I will simply assume that. So which of your difficulties could be tackled by AI? For example, an intelligent setup of the system administration. Depending on a role or a department, different rights classes might be assigned or suggested for selection. Or especially for a system cleanup, it can be used. Just imagine that similar entries can be merged easily. Or obviously false entries from the knowledge base are not recommended in suggestion lists anymore. I mean entries in which someone has, well, obviously fallen asleep on the keyboard, but now they are in the database, so the classical 11111. And these most often always show up on top of the list and therefore have to be removed quite frequently. Or it might be entries which clearly were just tests. Something like a failure 1, failure 11, failure 111, and when we run out of numbers, you go for failure A, B, and so on. They are automatically no longer presented in selection lists. The main advantage of AI in FMEA, however, is clearly for moderators and for team members. And what you see here is then just a selection of possibilities one could think of. You might have suggestion lists for functions, failures, and actions. So based on a function, you will get suggestions for potential failures. Maybe always the negation of a function presented as first failure. And of course, additional ones from the knowledge base, based on the context. Which failures were normally given to similar functions? You can quickly create variants based on templates and building blocks. Let's assume you have a process step with maybe machines as standard building block, or even several ones. And those are used in many of your products and have already been used in many products. You can just load these building blocks and the artificial intelligence will automatically connect the open ends. What do I mean by that? What do I mean with connect the open ends? I mean that failures in the product are automatically linked with failures in the process step, based on the former connections of this process step in other projects. Or simply consider the workload you have when you want to compare 5 possible variations of a product or a process. You need to manually arrange all different combinations and redo quite many connections when you want to consider the best solution, also from an FMEA point of view. And the AI will just quickly iterate so that you can directly compare the options and choose just the fitting one for you. Of course, it will help in standardizing and bringing consistency to the system. And this one goes clearly hand in hand with the benefit for the administrator I mentioned earlier, so cleanup of the database. Maybe the AI does not even need to help an administrator to clean up the system, but it directly enables the moderators to have consistent naming. How was this kind of failure to a function or this kind of action to a course called normally? But it goes even further. Also, evaluations within a project or throughout the database can become more consistent. The AI will check the, so to say, standard rating for a failure based on all the times you used it in the project or in other projects. And this is not only on the basis of the exact same entry, but it is really for similar failures based on context. Another option that is actually already available today in PeakAvenue products is the option to automatically translate content. So generally speaking, how can AI support in the process of FMEA creation? You can expect direct help and support in the interface by an AI tool. Basically, it will be a better version of him, Karl Klippit, or for the German ones, Karl Klammer. What does that now mean for us? It means that we should see AI as a digital assistant, or as mentioned before, a co-pilot, or to be more precise, we should actually see AI as a colleague of ours. You can give him a task and he will do it. He will come back with a result, probably quicker than most of our colleagues, probably with a higher accuracy than many of our colleagues. But as with any other colleague, We must control what was done. We cannot rely 100% on correct results. And this is a big change to the dogma for the last about 40 years. In the last 40 years, we have learned to consider results from a computer as correct, no matter what. But this no longer holds true when we work with artificial intelligence. Now we have to learn and especially accept that computer systems can and will make mistakes, just like any other human colleague we have. There are mainly two possible origins of failures for AI. Number one, the original information was wrong, so the AI is working based on wrong information and simply repeats it. Something you might have entered into the system before. And number two, the information was correct, but it was combined in the wrong way or used in a wrong setting. So yes, AI can make mistakes and we should not naively trust it. But this is not different to any other colleague. The advantage really is that you now can focus on the important areas and let AI take care of the less important things. While the AI is creating the general backbone, which is already known since it was used and thought through many times before, you can focus on the important things. The one new component you are trying to integrate with its interfaces, the new process step, or the new machine you are using.
So after that presentation of the use cases of artificial intelligence in the context of FMEA, we can now go to the legal limitations. And now, how does that look now with the copyright? Well, generative AI is based on the so-called LLMs, the large language models, for example, ChatGPT from OpenAI or LLaMA from Facebook. And these models are trained with the data of the internet up to a certain point in time. And this is exactly where the problem lies. In the language model, the data of other creators are processed and are stored inside of the model. And let's imagine that AI has been trained with the content of a standard, for example, the ISO 9001 standard. And a resourceful user now asks the question, please quote from the ISO 9001 in relation to risk management. The AI will now reproduce the text exactly as it is contained in the standard and provide it as knowledge of it. Why is it so? Well, the AI has learned to give this answer to exactly this question because this question was being asked very often in the internet. And now here we have a possible copyright violation because normally you have to pay for access such a standard. And there are many more examples here from the near past. For example, best-selling authors file class action lawsuit against the manufacturer of ChatGPT, OpenAI. Or because of the European data protection laws, Microsoft does not deliver the AI-based Copilot in Europe for the time being. Because of the European data protection laws, also, Microsoft does not mention to include it right now into Windows. And another point is, while generating images in the style of other images, the watermarks of the originals were simply copied on the generated ones. Or simply, ChatGPT generates valid Windows licensing keys, and so you can activate your Windows software without buying it. What does that mean? Well, if we only use the data from our own company, assuming that all data was legally acquired, so we should not have any copyright issues and no copyright problems arises. But there's another problem which can be called as transitivity problem. We can think of generative AI as a person who has read all the documents of a company or division. And if we now imagine, in contrast to this person, a normal user who has only read permissions on individual contents, then we have exact this transitivity problem. Suppose there is this superhero who has read all the data and you ask him a question which he answers with all of his knowledge. How do we prevent the superhero from accidentally leaking secrets or combining combinations of documents he has read that a normal user or employee would never have thought of? So the later one could be good or it could be bad. But what is important, however, is that the questioner may gain access to information that he should not have. And this brings us to the conclusion. The use of AI can also lead to potential data security and privacy issues. Think about it as the superhero in the last slide. Read your medical records. Now, the final question is, are we even allowed to use generative AI at all? And well, the answer is, it depends. But that should be not your problem, it is ours. Because the technology is so ingenious and the potential benefits are too great not to use the technology. So even if perhaps still some topics are to be clarified, I think we should think about it and begin to implementing features like that into our tools. So I can tell you that we have the topic in mind and are already in the process of designing and developing concepts and functions based on that technology. And now I will hand over to my colleague, Mr. Zambanini, for the last part of this presentation.
So we have now heard about AI in general and about different ideas, options to use AI in FMEA. We have heard about the general principle of how to interact with it and potential legal limitations. So let's take a look at our goals in the field of artificial intelligence. What will be our next step? What is PeakAvenue going to do? Together with our customers, we will identify tasks that can be simplifying your work and can be done by generative AI. And be assured, we do know that your data is your data, and we respect that. Having AI in a system does not mean that the information is available to everyone. Taking that into account, we will make repetitive tasks easier and working with FMEAs in our software fun. So please go ahead and share your ideas with us, because we create software for our users. Your efficiency is our goal. We are PeakAvenue. We make quality champions.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. We have now a few minutes left for questions and can start with the Q&A session.